Yeah, it was cool. It was,
Good morning, and welcome to the First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta. We are a philosophically based spiritual community founded on existential philosophy and feminist principles and dedicated to human liberation and the protection of the natural world. My name is Patton White, and I will be facilitating this morning's Sunday celebration of life. We make our spiritual home in the Old Stone Church, which was hand-built 100 years ago by the African-American Antioch East Baptist Church. We honor their labors of love and the powerful history of this special place. We acknowledge that our spiritual home stands on land forcibly taken from the Muskogee Creek people. We support justice and equality for all Indigenous people. Our opening words for today are a poem entitled Late Summer. Don't drift on alone through fields of conflict and despair. Watch the pleasant pastures come to life when you are there. Sit long enough in peacefulness, and you will see how great the world of nature compensates when summer is too late. This is a poem. This is a poem by Phil Soar. This morning we will be welcoming back Aviva with one of her songs, and this is one of our congregational songs, but she will be singing and playing it and leading us in song. It is called What a World There Can Be. So please rise and body your spirit as you are willing and able to join in with Aviva in What a World There Can Be.
Okay, I believe this is page 6 in your songbooks. What a World There Can Be. It's from a Hebrew song, Bishana Haba'a, and the music is by Nurit Hirsch. So, you ready? Here we go. It's got 2 verses. Soon the day will arrive when we can be together, and no longer will we live in fear. And the children will smile without wondering whether on that day dark new clouds will appear. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. We have dreamed, we have died to make a bright tomorrow, and our vision remains in our hearts. Now the torch must be passed with hope and not in sorrow, and I'll promise to make a new start. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me.
Thank you so much, Aviva. Love that song. It's always one of my one of those ones that kind of, there's something about the quality of the music that kind of touches my heartstrings in a particular way. Today's speaker, I do want to just let you know that this will be an audio recording only. There is nothing wrong with your device that you were watching it on, but our speaker, Robert Baker, sent in just an audio recording, so that is why you will not be seeing his lips moving as he's speaking. H. Robert Baker is Associate Professor of History at Georgia State University and is the author of Prigg versus Pennsylvania, Slavery, the Supreme Court, and the Ambivalent Constitution, which was in published in 2012, and The Rescue of Joshua Glover, a Fugitive Slave, the Constitution, and the Coming of the Civil War, which was published in 2006. His scholarly articles have appeared in the Law and History Review, Commonplace, and the Journal of Supreme Court History. He holds Ph.D. in history from UCLA, where he studied with Joyce Appleby. He has been a Fulbright Fellowship and been a fellow at the Institute of Constitutional Studies. He also writes about wine, law, and contemporary culture for the blog Tropics of Meta. Please welcome Dr. Robert Baker.
Good morning. I would like to thank you for being here and for taking the time to listen to me and for inviting me to speak here. I always treasure the invitation to speak to the First Existential Congregation of Atlanta. This morning, I'd like to tell you a story about race and law and identity. It is the story of Joseph Bedney's travels. In 1841, Joseph Bedney was maybe 16 years old and living in Mobile, Alabama. He hadn't always lived in Mobile. He moved around a lot. So did a lot of people in antebellum America, of course. But Bedney's trajectory was not a normal one. Think of it as a reverse Underground Railroad. Because Joseph Bedney had been born free in Ohio. He had traveled across the northern plains all the way to Missouri before being sold into slavery illegally. Joseph Bedney had been kidnapped. Bedney's journey would have been unknown to history were it not for his filing of a freedom suit in New Orleans in 1842. But let's start at the beginning. We don't know Joseph Bedney's mother's or father's names. All we know of them is that they were born in Shenandoah County, Virginia. Bedney's mother and father left Virginia in 1823 and moved to Ohio. This was not an easy journey. Depending on the route they took, it was between 400 and 500 miles. For the most part, it would have been across terrain that was still very much frontier, if not wilderness. The thick, deciduous forest was still home to hunters, outlaws, Indians. The roads were not well established in those portions of western Virginia and Pennsylvania. Most settlements cleaved to the Ohio River Valley, where water transport could connect agricultural products to Cincinnati and Louisville and New Orleans, and then the larger Atlantic world. And it was not easy, or even legal, for two black people to make that journey in 1823. Ohio had long forbidden black people to settle in the state unless they registered with a court of law and paid a bond. No white person had to meet those immigration requirements. Ohio's law served two purposes. The first was to prevent fugitive slaves from settling in the state. Ohio was bound by the United States Constitution to return fugitive slaves if they fled to the state, and Ohio's riverine border with Kentucky made the state a natural destination for refugees from slavery. The second reason, although not officially recorded in the legislative record, was to keep black people out of Ohio. Whatever liberal tendencies were evidenced in Ohio's anti-slavery constitution, there was still a strong racist streak in early 19th century statecraft. Travel on the Ohio frontier was dangerous for another reason. Kentucky slave catchers pursued fugitives into Ohio all the time. Under federal and state law, they could seize suspected fugitives. Slave catchers carried these captives back to Kentucky without ever asking permission from a court of law. There were also gangs of kidnappers that ranged the frontier, looking for free black people who were easy targets. As you can probably tell, it was pretty hard to tell the kidnappers apart from the slave catchers. Hardly a soul would question a party of men traveling with a black person or persons in chains. And who wouldn't expect a fugitive to claim that they were actually free, that they had been taken by a gang of kidnappers? These were just some of the risks that Joseph Bedney's parents faced in making the 400-mile journey from Virginia to Ohio. We don't know the route they took. They probably didn't tell anybody the route they took. We know only that they ended up in Pickaway County, Ohio, on a farm owned by William Stage and his brother Richard, just outside the town of Circleville, close to Columbus. The Stage brothers were Virginians themselves, from Shenandoah County. William Stage knew the Bedneys in Virginia. William himself had been born in 1783. He was young and poor, but a dreamer early on. He married his teenage sweetheart, Catherine Hile, in 1801. But years of toiling in Shenandoah County had gained him nothing. Poor and landless, William packed up his bride and they left for Ohio. He settled in Pickaway County and bought up land in 1807. Pickaway County had once been part of the fertile hunting grounds and agricultural plains for the Miami, the Shawnee, and the Mingo. Native Americans had been cleared by the United States Army in 1795, and a wave of settlers from the seaboard states remade central Ohio. Pickaway County's population alone was over 7,000 in 1810 and had doubled by 1820. William Stage's family doubled as well. Catherine bore 2, then 4 children. But his Virginia sweetheart, his teenage bride, met with a sudden and sad end. She died in 1819. She was not 30 years of age. William grieved and then remarried to Margaret Griffin, a Pickaway woman. She had some land of her own and some money. They had 3 children together before her death in 1835. William grieved again, then remarried again, this time to the widow Magdalena Rebar. That was a tough one. Magdalena had been married to John Rebar. John was a big man in Pickaway County, and his widow had a lot of property. Her sons were not eager to have their mother remarry. So, in 1836, William Stage drove his wagon up to Magdalena's home. She opened the window to her bedroom, climbed out, and got into his wagon. They eloped. William Stage was an impulsive man. So were the Bedneys. It had taken no small amount of pluck to cross the Appalachians, to brave the Ohio backcountry, and to resettle in the resoundingly white world of central Ohio. William Stage was a contact, and Stage gave them shelter. Mrs. Bedney worked as a domestic on the farm. Mr. Bedney probably went to Circleville, where there was a small neighborhood of people of color. There were jobs aplenty in Pickaway County, help at harvest time, driving the hogs to slaughter, or helping to dig the Ohio Canal, which came through Circleville. When Joseph Bedney was born on Richard Stage's farm, probably around 1827, this was the world he was born into. Central Ohio, a resoundingly white community, and 100 miles from the Ohio River and its boundary with slavery. Before he was 8 years old, Joseph Bedney was bound out as a servant to Dr. Thomas Burrell. He was bound out by his father. Being bound was not like having a job. A bound laborer couldn't leave his apprenticeship until he was 21 years of age, not unless he was mistreated by the person who employed him. From what we do know, the doctor treated him well. He kept young Joseph under his care, took him about the county on business. People along the way remarked about young Joseph's bright blue eyes, his wide smile, the fact that he would look men directly in their eyes when speaking to them. He was a bold boy, and people took note. In 1838, Dr. Burrell was planning to leave Pickaway County. Knowing Joseph would want to stay close to home, he arranged for another local man to take over Joseph's care. A man named Vincent Williams came forward. Vincent Williams was a latecomer to Pickaway County. He was from Kentucky. He had little money of his own, and he was something of a hanger-on, looking for some kind of opportunity. But by the time he arrived, the land in Pickaway County had all been bought and sold and improved and sold again. Now it was expensive. Vincent spoke frequently with the men of Pickaway County. He was naturally attracted to William Stage, the Virginian. William Stage, the self-made man, who had gone from poor Virginian to significant landholder in Ohio. William Stage was sympathetic. "There's nothing here for you," he told Williams. He himself was investing his money in land further west, in central Illinois. It was tough land, he told Vincent, but the soil was deep and black and rich. You just have to break open the prairie crust to get to it. Importantly, it was cheap. William Stage had scouted the land himself. It was a 3-day stagecoach trip to Macon, Illinois. After surveying property, Stage had gone to the land office and purchased 38 lots in Piatt County. Vincent tagged along on the next trip in 1837. He took Joseph Bedney as a valet. Williams lingered in Macon, scouted some property on his own, but he didn't purchase anything. They returned to Centerville. Vincent Williams was itchy. He went back to Macon in 1638, taking his young valet with him. The land was tempting, but he couldn't afford it. Not when he considered the money he would need to buy a plow and horses and to build a barn and to start up a farm. He needed money. So Vincent Williams and Joseph Bedney went further west still, to Illinois' eastern boundary, the Missouri River. Williams scouted opportunities up and down the river, through St. Louis, and then north to St. Charles. Then Vincent Williams did the unthinkable. Williams met a lot of people in St. Charles, some savory, some not. He met with Isaac Cade, a Texan. Texas was, at that point, an independent republic, a slaveholding republic. But with the international slave trade all but choked off by the British, Texans had to look elsewhere for supply. Cade was in St. Charles, and he was looking for slaves. In 1638, Vincent Williams sold Joseph Bedney to Isaac Cade. Isaac Cade would take Joseph Bedney down the Mississippi River, through St. Louis, through Louisiana, and from New Orleans, he would book passage to Texas. Joseph Bedney was lost, a boy of 13, with bright eyes, a piercing gaze, a warm smile. Lost in slavery. History sometimes takes place in the dark spaces where documents do not preserve memory, and for Bedney's teenage years, this was one of those spaces. While Bedney languished in slavery, America convulsed in a constitutional crisis. Southern senators, led by John C. Calhoun of South Carolina, had just put forward a bill that would have made it illegal to send abolitionist literature via the United States mail. Texas angled for statehood in the American Republic, but it was blocked by anti-slavery men in the northern states. 1840 was a presidential election year. The campaign was alarmingly sectional and vitriolic. Politics were degenerating. America appeared to be ungovernable. And in that year, Vincent Williams was arrested in Illinois for kidnapping Joseph Bedney. It was a serious charge. Kidnapping carried a 20-year sentence in Illinois, and the facts seem pretty clear. Vincent Williams had entered Illinois from Ohio with Joseph Bedney. He did so several times. Then he crossed the Missouri River and sold Joseph. Then he returned to Illinois and tried to set up a farm in Macon with his blood money. Vincent Williams hired a sharp lawyer from Springfield. We don't know his name, but he rambled into Macon and took the indictment apart. Did Williams ever take hold of Bedney? He asked the court. Was Bedney ever coerced? Had Bedney been taken to Illinois? And then the masterstroke. Wasn't Bedney a bound servant? Did not Williams have the right to sell Joseph Bedney's time to someone else? If so, wasn't that person the kidnapper and not Williams? Also in 1840, Bedney was no longer in Texas, but in Mobile, Alabama. It was only by luck that this had happened. Isaac Cade had died, and his creditors came for him. They broke up his estate and sold his assets. Joseph Bedney was one of those assets. He was sold and then sold again to a Mr. Hubert of Mobile, Alabama. For 2 years, Bedney resided with Hubert before Hubert took him to New Orleans and handed him over to the auction house of Joseph A. Beard. Why did Hubert resolve to sell Bedney so quickly? We can't be sure, but I suspect that Bedney told Hubert he had been kidnapped. This would have alarmed Hubert. About 10 years earlier, a young boy in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, named Cornelius Sinclair, had claimed he was kidnapped. Just like Bedney, Sinclair was a recent arrival in the state and had just been sold at public auction. Sinclair's enslavers tried to shut him up, but a delegation arrived from the city of Philadelphia with proof. The courts intervened to test the freedom of not just Cornelius Sinclair, but of a dozen kidnapped boys. The governor of Alabama himself would intervene. The kidnapper fled Alabama. He ended up in Mississippi, where he killed one of the kidnapped boys who had not been recovered. A Mississippi state prosecutor charged him with murder. The kidnapper fled to Texas, was brought back to Mississippi for trial, and he died a broken man. Everyone in Alabama knew the case. Hubert did too. And now, Hubert was in that man's shoes. If Hubert knew Bedne was a kidnapped free boy, then he had only three choices. He could try to hold him and be implicated himself. That was risky. His second option was to free Bedne, which would be financially ruinous. Hubert wasn't wealthy, and he had spent what savings he had on Bedne. In fact, he had probably had to take out a mortgage in order to purchase him. Most poor Southern whites who tried to become enslavers had to do this. Third, he could take Bedne to a nearby slave market, sell him, recover what money he could, and make it someone else's problem. New Orleans was home to the largest slave market in the United States, or anywhere else in North America for that matter. It was a clearinghouse for the millionaire planters of the Mississippi River Valley, renowned the world over for their instant riches, stately plantation homes, and cruel labor practices. New Orleans would ensure a quick sale. It was close enough to Mobile to be an easy journey, but it was also a big city, anonymous enough that no one would know Hubert or Bedne. And the sheer number of buyers and sellers and auction houses meant that the sale would come quickly. Bedne was young and growing strong. He would fetch a good price, and Hubert would be rid of his problem. But Hubert had not anticipated one problem with New Orleans. It was full of lawyers. And it was not uncommon for people of color to press freedom suits there, where they had a reasonable chance of success. Joseph Bedney filed a freedom petition on January 27, 1842. His lawyer was a man from the Market Exchange, an E. Heastand, Esquire. It was an odd choice. There were lawyers who specialized in freedom suits. Several in particular were known to roam the auction houses and troll the slave pens looking for business. But Heastand wasn't one of them. Maybe that was for the best. The freedom suit lawyers were among the worst in the city. They lost most of their cases, mostly through incompetence. They were paid either way, as they usually charged up front for fees. But Heastand was a competent attorney, a good attorney. This might not have been his particular field of expertise, but so what? Heastand's strategy was simple. Let Joseph Bedney tell his story. How he was born in Ohio, how he had traveled through Illinois, had been kidnapped and sold in Missouri, taken to Texas, then Mobile, and now New Orleans. The key was his birth in Ohio. Ohio was a free state, and if Bedney was born in Ohio, then he could not be a slave. It followed that Hubert could claim no property interest in him. Bedney told a good story, but Heastand knew what he needed. Evidence, the more the better. Heastand took a list of names from Bedney of people he knew in Pickaway County, Ohio, people who had known him from birth, who could testify under oath about where he was born. Because they were out of state, he proposed to have them enter the record by submitting interrogatories. Interrogatories were pre-written questions vetted by the court. The opposing attorney would have the opportunity to provide cross-interrogatories, in essence giving him an opportunity to cross-examine the witnesses. Heastand sent interrogatories to William Stage, William Short, and Nathan Denny. Under oath, each of them corroborated Joseph Bedney's story. "Do you know where Joseph Bedney was born?" "Yes," said William Stage. "He was born on my brother's place in Walnut Township, Pickaway County." "I knew him some 13 years," said William Short. "I first knew the boy when he was living on Rich Stage's farm." Nathan Denny testified that, "I've known him since he was at his mother's breast. I knew him in this country. I knew him well when he was with his parents. I knew him under the care of Dr. Thomas Burrell." Each of the men also testified that Joseph Bedney had left Ohio with Vincent Williams in 1838 and had never returned. William Stage recalled hearing about Williams's kidnap trial in 1840 on a trip back to Macon. Then, in 1841, he saw Vincent Williams in Circleville. The two talked. Stage testified, "I asked Williams how he got along with the case. He told me that he had been indicted for the offense of selling Bedne and had got a lawyer from Springfield, Illinois, who had picked a hole in the indictment and got him cleared. He said he had only sold Bedne's time to Cade of Texas, and that he said he had a right to do so. He let me know by his conversation that Cade had taken Bedne to Texas." Hubert's lawyer tried to trip up the witnesses. "How do you know Bedne?" he asked. "Where do you know him? How long have you known him?" They were all questions asked before. Maybe he was hoping for an inconsistent answer, something to impeach the witness's credibility, but nothing seemed to work. "Are you sure it is the same Bedne in the suit?" "I know him well," answered William Stage. "How do you know that fact?" Stage shrugged this question off. The circumstances are too rare to be someone else. The attorney pressed on. "Do you know anything of Bedne's earlier history, anything at all? If so, state it now." William Stage answered no. He had told the attorneys everything already. And then came the real question. "Have you, at any period of your life, assisted any Negro, mulatto, or person of color in acquiring their freedom?" The slaveholder's attorney must have thought he had the Ohio man. Everyone south of the Mason-Dixon line knew that the Underground Railroad wasn't just an underground railroad in Ohio. It was an elevated train. Ohio's biggest political stars were anti-slavery men. Salmon P. Chase, the state's most famous lawyer and politician, was known nationally as the Attorney General of Fugitive Slaves. Even if William Stage had not helped Bedne escape, the question was sure to catch him. Certainly he had helped someone escape. But Stage answered firmly, "I never have." The other witnesses kept to their testimony. None were abolitionists. None had helped any enslaved person gain their freedom. And they were all sure that Joseph Bedne in the suit was the Joseph Bedne they knew back in Pickaway County, Ohio. The testimony proved decisive. On January 17, 1843, the court rendered judgment. Joseph Bedne, the court said, was born free. He was entitled to his freedom, and the court ordered the defendant to pay costs. Hubert had lost. He went back to Mobile, empty-handed, and now in debt. His adventure was not unlike most poor Southern whites who believed that investing in human property would fulfill all of their dreams. Slavery was one of those institutions that harm more than just the persons it dehumanized. We don't know what happened to him. He did not report any property in the census of 1850. He didn't even report a residence in Mobile. Vincent Williams left Ohio. No one knows where he went. By 1843, he could not stay in Circleville, not after what he had done to Joseph Bedne. William Stage had done right by Joseph Bedne. The old Virginian turned Ohioan was, by now, nearing his dotage. By 1850, his collected properties were valued at $35,000. By 1860, they had doubled in value. He would die with assets valued just over $2 million in today's money. His many children were already established as farmers across Ohio and Illinois. Joseph Bedne was free. He settled in Indiana. By 1870, he reported to the census that he was living in Indianapolis, where he owned a butcher shop and some real estate. He also reported that he was white. Was Bedne, the young boy of color who had been kidnapped and sold into slavery, white? William Stage had said that he had bright blue eyes and yellowish hair, was of a light yellow complexion. William Short had said that he had very light hair, blue eyes, good teeth, and a light complexion. Nathan Denny, one of the witnesses, had said that Bedne was rather bold in his appearance. He grinned when spoken to. He had good teeth, rather far apart. He had light eyes and yellow complexion. If we knew more about Bedne's mother, we might know more about him. But by the time Bedne was kidnapped, his mother was dead. All of the witnesses testified to that. As for the father, William Short said that the father was reputed to be dead. Nathan Denny testified that the father was gone, but no one knew where. William Stage also testified that he had heard that the father was dead. The same father, of course, who had bound out his son before he was 10, who had never gone looking for him, and now no one seemed to know where he was. Meanwhile, William Stage had gone looking for Joseph Bedne in Illinois. He had inquired after him when Vincent Williams returned to Circleville. William Stage had found out about Isaac Cade. He had verified Cade's death. He knew that his executors had sold Joseph Bedney. It looked suspiciously like William Stage was trying to find Joseph Bedney. And finally, someone had to make sure that Bedney had a good lawyer and could afford costly depositions, someone with means, and someone who cared about what happened to the boy. Was William Stage Joseph Bedney's father? Joseph Bedney's travels have much to teach us. We can learn about perseverance, about will and survival. We learn that the law which made slavery was also a shield for people like Joseph Bedney, who were wrongfully trapped in slavery. It is perplexing enough that judges, prosecutors, even the governors of Alabama and Mississippi, all of whom carried so much water in the pro-slavery cause and politics, would still respect the law when the law was for people like Joseph Bedney. Bedney's travels teach us something more about race and identity. Race is a construct, always has been. It is no less a construct simply because it correlates to seemingly identifiable features, such as a shade of skin or shape of a skull. Whatever his parentage, Joseph Bedney's fate was wrapped in the lies that people have always told themselves to make sense of the world around them. This feature, this skin tone, that they mean something, that we can tell something from them. Those lies are what men like Vincent Williams relied upon to commit a horrible crime. What men like Mr. Hubert of Mobile, Alabama had blindly accepted to his own ruin. As for Joseph Bedney, he survived the lies, and he wrote his own future out of it.
Thank you so much, Robert. We always enjoy hearing from you, and you always have such interesting stories to share. Please join us on Zoom immediately following this broadcast for our meet and greet, where we will be discussing the topic of today's talk, as well as sharing personal joys, sorrows, and concerns, and community announcements. You can find the link to the Zoom meeting in the chat section of today's broadcast. Next week, we will be hearing from our own fellowship minister, the Reverend Marcia Michener, with her talk, What Do You Do When the Well Runs Dry? And considering that much of the West that is happening, it should be a rather timely topic. Thank you again so much for joining us today. We hope to see you on the Zoom meeting immediately following, or next Sunday at 11 a.m. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your day today, and have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.